Story 1. This story is told from the perspective of a female. I live in Australia, and I'd been seeing this guy for a really short time, like a few months. At the time of this story, I'd just finished university, and I was not looking for anything serious. This guy was a foreigner, and he had slightly different ideas and customs to me, which was fine most of the time. He had some different ideas on women, which was not so great, but I could live with it for the most part. The biggest problem was that he had these fits of rage that got worse and worse, and he started treating me like I was his property. When we would go out together, he would spend most of the night checking to see if guys were staring at me, and if they were, he would blow up and go crazy at them. It would even sometimes escalate to violence, and he was well trained and practiced MMA, so he really was a scary and dangerous individual. If I'm 100% honest with myself, this was a major part of why I was attracted to him in the first place. I've always been a real sucker for the wrong type of guys. Once things had become too much, I decided to break up with him, and I broke the relationship off with him in a cafe. I chose a public place because I did not feel safe doing it in private. I honestly didn't know how he was going to react. He didn't say much when I told him that I didn't want to see him anymore, but he did storm off in a massive huff and slam the cafe door on his way out. A week went past after this incident, and he had spent the week messaging me non-stop asking to get back together. I'd even began completely ignoring him as there was just simply no getting through to him. He just didn't want to get the message. His last message, however, I couldn't ignore. It was genuinely terrifying and sent chills down my spine. It read, "Nobody is going to want you anymore once I'm done with you, you stupid dog whore slag." I messaged him back asking what the hell he meant with that, but I never received a reply from him. I was of course freaked out by his text message, but I really just thought he was speaking out of anger. But sadly, he was 100% serious. At this time I was working as a customer service rep for a tech firm, and I would leave our little call centre office at around 11 at night. As I walked out of the office one night, I could tell something was not quite right. It was deadly quiet out. Too quiet. I had a terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. As I walked down the back streets of the town centre, I had a feeling that I was being followed. I could hear the echoes of footsteps following me. Every time I would stop, the echoes would quickly stop too. I began to walk faster and pick up the pace. I could occasionally even see a shadow of a man gliding across the street near me. My paranoia about being followed was actually real. I knew I had to do something. As I turned the corner, I walked into a late-night kebab restaurant, and I sat in the corner of the restaurant. Just as I sat down, my heart sank as I looked at the window. I saw the top of my ex-boyfriend's head walking past down the street. It was him after all. He had been following me. Luckily for me, it appeared as though he'd not seen me go into the restaurant. I stayed and even ate at the restaurant. I was getting nervous as the time flew by because I knew the later it would be, the less people there would be in the streets. After eating and paying, I walked out the restaurant and checked both ways. All signs seemed to be clear. I was only 10 minutes away from home at this point, so I began walking as quickly as I could. I walked down the back streets, and to my utter horror, the echoes of footsteps reappeared once again. I could feel my heart beating out of control. I began panicking and walking as fast as I could. I was so nervous that I accidentally took a wrong turn and ended up down the wrong back street. A dead end. As I turned around to go back the way I just came, there he was, stood a few meters away. My ex-boyfriend, with a very angry look on his face. He stood there, but didn't say anything. He then lifted up his hand. In his hand, he had a cup. Before I could even blink, he threw the contents of the cup at me. I instinctively ducked down and felt the water pour down the back of my neck and down the top of my back. As I looked up, I could see my ex-boyfriend running away down the street. What a loser, I thought. He had followed me all this way just to throw water at me. Just as I was thinking that, I began to feel very hot. I put my hand on my neck, and when I checked my hand, I had peeled off skin all over it. I couldn't understand what was happening. I could feel the skin peeling off down the back of my neck. It was getting worse and worse, and the burning sensation was becoming excruciating. I then realized he had not thrown water at me. It was acid. I ran back to the main street and screamed for help. I went to hospital for treatment. The attack had left the back of my neck and upper back horrifically scarred. Luckily, the acid wasn't as strong as it could have been. Otherwise, it could have been even worse, doctors told me. I often wear a scarf when I go out to hide the marks. Luckily, the acid did not touch my face, only a drop behind my left ear. I've been in and out of surgery since this happened. My ex is now in prison, serving an 8-year sentence. Story 2. I had been seeing this girl for a year and a half, and when I say seeing her, I mean mostly having sex, and that was all. I know I sound like a bit of a jerk-off, but that's what it was. A relationship based on that. We would meet up, do what we wanted to do, and then part ways. Call it what you will, but that was what we had. I was totally cool with it, and so was she. We pretty much worked in perfect harmony. She was a bit clingy at times, and she used to get jealous, but nothing really seemed out of the ordinary, to be honest. That was until I got a serious girlfriend, who worked at the same office as me. I didn't want to see both the girls at the same time, so I had to make a choice, and the office romance I'd started was definitely going to be more serious, so I decided to do the right thing and break it off with the girl that I'd been having sex with for over a year. Oh, and to add to this story, we used to meet at her place as she lived very close to my work. Me being the complete moron that I am, I broke up with her via text message. I know I'm not helping my case here, and you're probably thinking that I'm definitely a complete douchebag. But anyway, back to the story at hand. I text this girl saying I'd met someone and that we shouldn't see each other anymore. She messaged me back saying okay, no problem. And I thought that would be the end of it, and that I'd gotten away really easy. But man, was I in for a surprise. A few days later, she messaged me asking for me to come over, as though nothing had happened. I told her again that I was now seeing someone else, and I couldn't. She then started getting kind of aggressive in the text, and asked me who it was, and stupidly, not realizing how insane she'd become, I told her. She then started sending weird messages saying things like I hope you and her die together in a car crash, and all sorts of stuff. Her last message said, see you in 30 minutes. I couldn't believe it. She was now on her way to my work. An hour later I saw her car race into the car park of my work. I watched on in horror from office window. I was so nervous about what she was going to do. My new girlfriend and the other colleagues were looking on laughing, which didn't help. She then got out of her car with a plastic bag. She then walked over to my car, and then she tipped a load of used condoms onto my car windshield and screamed, "You can have these back, you cheating liar." Fortunately, she got in her car and drove straight off. I think even she was embarrassed, to be honest. She had actually, no word of a lie, kept every single condom that I'd used with her and thrown in the trash when I was at her place, and had now thrown them on my car windshield. So weird, and it was so embarrassing. I actually had to go out into the car park of my work and clear my own used condoms off my windshield. And on top of all this, my boss and all my colleagues saw it happen. They have never stopped making fun of me since. I don't think I'll ever live it down. Story 3. This story is told from the perspective of a female. I used to date this guy on and off for a very long time. It was an intense relationship, one that still comes back to haunt me every so often. No matter how hard I try, it always seems to come back in one form or another. It was super intense. We would be together, and then I would break it off because of some argument, or sometimes he would become overly aggressive with me. Sometimes he would even get slightly violent towards me. He would slap me and choke me a bit. And I don't know, maybe I'm stupid, but I would always find an excuse to get back with him. And in the end, we would always end up together. Another reason we would always get back together is that he would constantly threaten that he was going to commit suicide, and that it would be my fault if he did. I used to feel really guilty, and just say okay, and we would go back to being together again. During the time of this incident, we'd been living together in a small apartment in our hometown. We had been living together for a very short period of time, no more than a few months at this stage. Living with him had been absolute hell on earth. The aggressive outbursts and violent attacks had spiraled out of control. On my final night of sharing an apartment, he'd been saying horrific things like, I should end it all, and we should perish together to concrete our love for all eternity. He had spent the night talking to himself and marching around the apartment back and forth. It was the final straw in what had been a string of nightmarish incidents, and I just couldn't take it anymore. Maybe it was the coward's way out, but when he went out to visit his parents, I left, and I left him a note saying that I was leaving, and that I was very sorry, and that he should go and seek the correct medical assistance. Writing this now, I cannot help but think that I could have perhaps done more for him at that time. But at that time I was a lot less secure as a person, and I was very scared of his reaction, and I couldn't deal with it anymore, and I just didn't want to. I wanted to be free and to enjoy being young, not in a slutty way, just in an emotional way. It was such a heavy weight to bear for someone as young as I was. I took my things and went to my mum's house. I was so relieved when I got home. I remember the feeling of peace rushing over me, the smell of my house, comfort food, my mum's lasagna, and the fresh lemonade that she makes were enough to temporarily calm me. As I expected, my boyfriend, or should I say ex at this particular time, went absolutely crazy. I was trying my best not to look at my phone, but when I did, I had over 250 missed calls, messages, answer machine messages, the full works. He knew where my mother lived, so I knew it was just a matter of time, and I was right. He knocked on my door, and my mum told him to give me some space. She didn't open the door to him, and he seemed to take it okay. He didn't really kick up much of a fuss. He left without too much commotion. It was now night time, and I went to bed, and around 1 a.m. I heard small stones being thrown at my bedroom window. I knew it was him. Part of me wanted to answer, but I thought no, this has to end. It has ended. He needs to move on. I then heard tapping on my window. He had actually climbed up our drain pipes to knock on my window. I ignored that too, and he began knocking louder, but I still ignored him. I did not want to be part of his silly games anymore. I'd had enough. I eventually fell asleep, and I woke up to hear my mum screaming downstairs. I sat up in bed and checked the clock. It was 7:14 a.m. I will never forget that number. I walked to my window and opened the curtains. There was my ex-boyfriend, swinging back and forth from my garage, lifeless, with a cable rope around his neck. He had threatened to do it for years, and now had gone through with it. I always feel guilty, even though I know I shouldn't, and I often have nightmares where I remember his dead body, swaying back and forth. Hey there everyone, I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the video, and if you've ever had a difficult ex and want to share your story, then leave a comment about it too. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit the like button, as it really helps me grow and enables me to make more and more content for the people that enjoy it. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe for more real life horror.